Good evening. Welcome to Open Line once again. As we are coming up on the half hour, we are talking about the state of education in our schools in 2022 as we enter our third academic year doing COVID along with educating our kids. And Beth Brown from the Tennessee Education Association is joining me tonight. We've already talked about a lot of things, but one thing I want to touch on, I remember back during the governor's State of the State address this year, he talked about different efforts to recruit teachers. And I wonder if you remember those as well, if you thought they were effective, and what is happening in our state when it comes to that, because we need teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the most memorable lines from any of Governor Lee's speeches is a pledge from Governor Lee to make Tennessee the best place in which to teach, learn, and live. It's something that I think about all the time when I'm advocating for our public schools, our students, and our educators. Right now, we're not there, and we are experiencing, like many other states across the nation, we are experiencing an acute educator shortage. We came into the year with an educator shortage. This is not a problem caused by the pandemic, but it's been certainly made worse by the pandemic as folks have left the profession. I can't tell you how many, but folks have left the profession. It is becoming increasingly challenging to meet the needs of students because the needs are becoming more challenging. And with the shortages that we're experiencing, those who are actually working in our districts are having more and more responsibilities piled on to them with no relief in sight and quite frankly, no additional compensation in most places across the state. And so we are seeing folks opting for retirement. We're seeing folks leaving the profession and going to something else. I was notified that an educator, one of our members, notified us over the weekend that he was leaving the profession entirely. Actually, I heard from about 3 different educators over the holiday break that they're going to do something else because it's less stressful and they can get more money.
Yeah, it really does come down to that for a lot of folks, and you can't blame them. And teaching isn't the only profession where this is happening. There are a lot of different professions where people are saying, I'm going to reevaluate. Everyone's kind of coined it the Great Resignation. So where do we fall in teacher pay? How do we stack up across the nation?
Well, when we talk about investment in our students, we are 46th in the nation in per pupil expenditures, or what we spend to educate a student in the state of Tennessee. We're 46th in the nation, which quite frankly is it's a tragedy. Yeah. And it's unacceptable when we think about the billions of dollars that we have in cash reserve that could be used for a variety of things to help improve public education across the state of Tennessee beyond educator salaries and benefits. And I don't want your listeners to think, oh, she just cares about educators. I'm an educator. I'm a 21-year educator. I came into the profession because I love kids and I want to help my students be prepared to do whatever it is they want to do after high school. I'm a high school English teacher. But the bottom line is if we don't have educators, if we don't have adults who are willing to come into our buildings, to come into our work sites and work with students, what are we going to do with our kids? Mm-hmm. And so they're not disconnected. You can't talk about supporting students without supporting educators. So having better salaries and benefits for educators, making this a profession that they can actually afford to come into and not have to work 2 and 3 extra jobs is really, really critical. But we have to think about other things when we're talking about education funding, resources, technology access, making sure that our students have access to clean and safe buildings, that they have access to high quality instructional materials. There are a lot of things that go into educating students. So we've got to be talking about the salaries that our educators need and then the resources that they need in order to do their jobs.
And can we raise both things? Is that a realistic goal in the short term?
Yes, it is. And here's why, Carrie. We can do we can make these major investments in public education without raising taxes in Tennessee because, one, we already have this huge reserve, and we continue to build that reserve because we take in so much unbudgeted revenue every single month. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars every month in revenue that's unbudgeted that could be used to better fund our public schools.
Do you think it is as simple as a competitive wage for our teachers and staff in schools would get more teachers back in the classroom? Would we see that really go hand in hand?
That's part of it. I think another piece of it is respecting the profession, not just with professional competitive wages, paying our educators, our highly trained professionals, with wages that are comparable to similarly trained college educated folks. That is part of it. Part of it, though, is also recognizing educators as the trained professionals that they are. We have multiple degrees. We spend years and years getting training and degrees to help us know how to do our jobs, help us to know how to educate our students. But what we're seeing increasingly is a restriction on our professional autonomy. Quite frankly, we're seeing folks who want to just give us scripted lessons and completely throw out all of the training that we have invested in ourselves. And so it's not just about the compensation, it's also about the professional respect. It's about providing educators with the resources that they need to do their jobs. The TEA did a survey recently near the end of the fall semester for educators across the state. We had a really high participation rate, and some of the data was really, really unsettling. What we saw was educators saying their work really matters to them. 96% of the respondents said that their work is extremely meaningful to them, but they are not feeling that they're successful in their jobs this year. They are not feeling supported, and they are unsure. 61% said they are unsure or are unlikely to stay in the profession for the next 3 years. And 72% that they were somewhat or very unlikely to recommend the profession to others. And so when we think about the shortage that we're already experiencing and how folks are feeling right now about staying in the profession, we're at a crisis, and people need to understand we're at a crisis.
Most certainly. I want to go back to the governor talking about different teacher recruitment efforts and different efforts to get teachers into the classroom more quickly. Have those panned out into actual programs that are working?
I'm aware of a few programs. There are a couple of programs in Nashville. I can't speak to their efficacy. I do know that there's a program in Clarksville that has received national attention, where the Clarksville School District is partnering with Austin Peay State University to take education support professionals who are working in our districts already and help them get certified as educators. One of the things that we need to be very cautious about, though, and I fully support building that educator pipeline. It's critical for our students and our communities in our state, but we want to make sure that the people we're getting into our classrooms are highly trained, committed individuals. And so as we're thinking about how to address the shortage, we can't shortchange our students by putting unqualified and unsupported individuals in our schools and in our classrooms.
What do you like? What do you think will work when it comes to teacher recruitment?
So there are a lot of things to consider, and I will be the first to tell you I do not have a magic wand and can't tell you the 100% correct answer, but there are some things that will help. We've already talked about compensation and benefits. We need to think about the cost of getting educators training, because when we have folks who are going into college and becoming educators, then they're going into a profession that doesn't pay them. They have all of this student debt that they can never pay off. So student loan forgiveness programs for folks who are going into education, supporting education support professionals who are already dedicated to those communities, who understand the schools and understand the communities in which they live, helping them to transition to certificate dedicated employees. We need to be very deliberate about supports for our early career educators, particularly I think in the next 5 years, because we have a group of individuals coming, the ones who are going into the education preparation programs, whose education training has been as disrupted as our K-12 students. So we've talked a lot about disruption to learning in our K-12 schools. Our college students have experienced that same sort of disruption, and so the type of preparation they've received is not the same as folks who were coming into the profession before the pandemic. And so it's going to be even more critical that our educators in the earliest years of their careers have very strong supports, and not just saying, oh, they've got a mentor, but actual supports so that they can be successful in their careers.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that aspect of it. I imagine that student teaching was very hard to do, if at all, when kids are remote learning, during the 2020 semester or school year and so forth.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, how do you do that? Interesting. Okay. Yep. As we mentioned, the legislative session does start tomorrow. I know you're going to go in with guns blazing. What's on the top of your agenda?
Well, it will not shock you that education funding is our number one agenda. We know that we have a lot of needs in our public schools. We have the ability. It's affordable. It's right. It is time to invest all this surplus revenue and all of this surplus cash that we have laying around in our state. Our students deserve to have that investment. So we will certainly be advocating for that. We are also having conversations with the State Board of Education and certainly plan to have the conversations with members of the General Assembly around our teacher evaluation policy and the program itself. It was completely overhauled in 2011, and since then there have been very few changes. I think one of the lessons of the pandemic is that education can't look the same as it did in 2011, and so we need to make sure that we are continually evaluating our own evaluation instrument to make sure that it's doing what it needs to do, which is to help educators hone their craft and become better professionals. We also will be thinking about the survey that was just released by TARA, the Tennessee Education Research Alliance, that demonstrated that we have some pretty significant bias in our evaluation system. I don't know if you read their report, but our African American and Black males in the profession are receiving lower evaluation scores, even when their students are performing at a similar level to their peers, even when they're meeting all of these, they're demonstrating the same level of professional excellence, they're receiving lower scores. And so we have to peel back the curtain and have some hard conversations around some of that bias there. We are also going to be advocating, as we always do, for increased supports for our education support professionals. That's another area where the pandemic has really demonstrated just how important our education support professionals are to keeping our school buildings and our districts open. Our bus drivers, our secretaries, our cafeteria workers, our custodial workers, they do not earn enough to make a decent living, and they need an increase in pay, and they also need due process where they can be comforted knowing that they have a job throughout the year, that they're not just at-will employees. So we'll be advocating for stronger supports for our education support professionals, and we'll also be advocating for stronger language in the law around collaboration between educators and management. We know that it's best for everybody when educators and the district leaders, the decision makers, work together to create great public schools for every student.
You got a lot on your agenda, Beth.
Yeah, I told you it's my last 6 months. I've got to go out with
you got to throw it all out there. That's right. Hey, let's jump to the phones real quick. We have Lane waiting ever so patiently. Lane, thank you for calling in tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Miss Sherry. Now, the last time she was on the air, I called in and spoke with her, and I left a few comments, but after I went off the air, she went right around my main points calling in, my main concern, because I told you and her that I have family and friends with employees with the Department of Education here in Metro. Some are custodians, some are teachers and educators. They do the best they can to encourage students, and they clean up, and some not custodians, some are teachers, some work in the cafeteria, and witness horrible things, and they're told to keep their mouths shut by the principals. And she refused to comment on the question, why do you need 4 principals at these schools? She didn't comment on that. And also, she put it on the custodians to do all the cleaning up and sanitizing the room. It's up to the teachers to do the same thing when they leave the classroom to the next. And she bypassed everything I said. And she's a hypocritical politician, the way she's commenting on questions tonight. And also, they got a ball game coming on tonight. They just reported in the Tennessee on Sunday that these schools are paying these coaches up with $100 million or more in athletic departments, and they could pay off students' debts long term and help pay down the college funds for these students. And nobody's not even commenting about taking some of these funds and putting it in the education of these students instead of these private voucher programs. I wish you could comment on that. Thank you.
Okay, we cover a lot of areas there. Thank you, Lane, for calling in. Beth, anything that you want to respond to there?
There was a lot. Some of it I couldn't tell if it was questions or he was sharing about a previous experience. I will talk about that last one. I can assure Mr. Lane that the Tennessee Education Association does not support any sort of voucher program. We believe that public dollars should stay in our public school system.
Okay. We also have Catherine on the line. Catherine, can you hear us okay? Catherine, you got to make sure you turn down your TV and listen to your phone.
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
Yes, just turn down your TV and listen to your phone.
Okay.
And then you can go ahead whenever you can. Hi, go ahead, Catherine.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you for acknowledging the support staff. We really appreciate you advocating for us. So we just want to say thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Catherine. Thank you very much. You know, Beth, it is very important. We have seen a lot of bus drivers just here in the metro area stage protest over the last semester, the way they have been treated, their pay, what they have been asked to do, and how many routes they've been asked to do just because of the shortage of staff.
Absolutely. Our schools cannot function without our education support professionals. When we talk about educating students, it is much, much more than the teacher who stands in the front of the classroom like me. And that's why you don't hear me talk about teachers. You hear me use the phrase educators, because janitors are educators, cafeteria workers are educators, bus drivers are educators. Every single person who works in a school district and contributes to the education of the whole child, who takes care of their physical needs, their emotional needs, their academic needs, they are educating those children, those students, and they deserve better pay, better benefits, and much more respect. I take my hat off to every education support professionals. I can sit here and name off all of the ESPs in my school building and how critical they are for our schools to operate. And I just cannot say enough good things about our education support professionals.
Yeah. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we'll wrap it up for the night. Stay with us.